Welcome to Soft Hour Library. Tonight's story begins now. Close your eyes and rest.
Chapter 5, Mrs. Renaud's Story. We found M. Hortet awaiting us in the hall, and we all proceeded upstairs together, Frances marching ahead to show us the way. Poirot went up in a zigzag fashion which puzzled me until he whispered with a grimace. No wonder the servants heard M. Renaud mounting the stairs, not a board of them, but creaks fit to wake the dead. At the head of the staircase, a small passage branched off. "The servants' quarters," explained Bex. We continued along a corridor, and Frances tapped on the last door to the right of it. A faint voice bade us enter, and we passed into a large sunny apartment looking out towards the sea, which showed blue and sparkling about a quarter of a mile distant. On a couch propped up with cushions and attended by Dr. Durand lay a tall, striking-looking woman. She was middle-aged, and her once dark hair was now almost entirely silvered, but the intense vitality and strength of her personality would have made itself felt anywhere. You knew at once that you were in the presence of what the French call une maîtresse femme. She greeted us with a dignified inclination of the head. "Pray be seated, messieurs." We took chairs, and the magistrate's clerk established himself at a round table. "I hope, madame," began M. Hortet, "that it will not distress you unduly to relate to us what occurred last night." "Not at all, monsieur. I know the value of time if these scoundrelly assassins are to be caught and punished." "Very well, madame. It will fatigue you less, I think, if I ask you questions and you confine yourself to answering them. At what time did you go to bed last night?" "At 9:30, monsieur. I was tired." "And your husband?" "About an hour later, I fancy." "Did he seem disturbed, upset in any way?" "No, not more than usual." "What happened then?" "We slept. I was awakened by a hand being pressed over my mouth. I tried to scream out, but the hand prevented me. There were two men in the room. They were both masked." "Can you describe them at all, madame?" "One was very tall and had a long black beard. The other was short and stout. His beard was reddish. They both wore hats pulled down over their eyes." "H.M.," said the magistrate thoughtfully, "too much beard, I fear." "You mean they were false?" "Yes, madame, but continue your story." "It was the short man who was holding me. He forced a gag into my mouth and then bound me with rope hand and foot. The other man was standing over my husband. He had caught up my little dagger paper knife from the dressing table and was holding it with the point just over his heart. When the short man had finished with me, he joined the other, and they forced my husband to get up and accompany them into the dressing room next door. I was nearly fainting with terror. Nevertheless, I listened desperately. They were speaking in too low a tone for me to hear what they said, but I recognized the language, a bastard Spanish such as is spoken in some parts of South America. They seemed to be demanding something from my husband, and presently they grew angry and their voices rose a little. I think the tall man was speaking. "You know what we want," he said. "The secret, where is it?" "I do not know what my husband answered, but the other replied fiercely, 'You lie, we know you have it.' "Where are your keys?" Then I heard sounds of drawers being pulled out. There is a safe on the wall of my husband's dressing room in which he always keeps a fairly large amount of ready money. Leonie tells me this has been rifled and the money taken, but evidently what they were looking for was not there, for presently I heard the tall man, with an oath, command my husband to dress himself. Soon after that, I think some noise in the house must have disturbed them, for they hustled my husband out into my room only half-dressed. "Pardon," interrupted Poirot, "but is there then no other egress from the dressing room?" "No, monsieur, there is only the communicating door into my room. They hurried my husband through, the short man in front, and the tall man behind him with the dagger still in his hand. Paul tried to break away to come to me. I saw his agonized eyes. He turned to his captors. "I must speak to her," he said. Then, coming to the side of the bed, "It is all right, Eloise," he said. "Do not be afraid. I shall return before morning." But although he tried to make his voice confident, I could see the terror in his eyes. Then they hustled him out of the door, the tall man saying, "One sound, and you are a dead man, remember." "After that," continued Mrs. Renaud, "I must have fainted. The next thing I recollect is Léonie rubbing my wrists and giving me brandy." "Madame Renaud," said the magistrate, "had you any idea what it was for which the assassins were searching?" "None whatever, monsieur." "Had you any knowledge that your husband feared something?" "Yes, I had seen the change in him." "How long ago was that?" Mrs. Renaud reflected. 10 days, perhaps. "Not longer." "Possibly I only noticed it then." "Did you question your husband at all as to the cause?" "Once he put me off evasively. Nevertheless, I was convinced that he was suffering some terrible anxiety. However, since he evidently wished to conceal the fact from me, I tried to pretend that I had noticed nothing." "Were you aware that he had called in the services of a detective?" "A detective?" exclaimed Mrs. Renaud, very much surprised. "Yes, this gentleman, M. Hercule Poirot," Poirot bowed. "He arrived today in response to a summons from your husband." And taking the letter written by M. Renaud from his pocket, he handed it to the lady. She read it with apparently genuine astonishment. "I had no idea of this." Evidently, he was fully cognizant of the danger. "Now, madame, I will beg of you to be frank with me. Is there any incident in your husband's past life in South America which might throw light on his murder?" Mrs. Renaud reflected deeply, but at last shook her head. "I can think of none. Certainly my husband had many enemies, people he had got the better of in some way or another, but I can think of no one distinctive case. I do not say there is no such incident, only that I am not aware of it." The examining magistrate stroked his beard disconsolately. "And you can fix the time of this outrage?" "Yes, I distinctly remember hearing the clock on the mantelpiece strike 2. She nodded towards an 8-day traveling clock in a leather case which stood in the center of the chimney-piece. Poirot rose from his seat, scrutinized the clock carefully, and nodded, satisfied. "And here too," exclaimed M. Bex, "is a wrist watch, knocked off the dressing table by the assassins, without doubt, and smashed to atoms. Little did they know it would testify against them." Gently he picked away the fragments of broken glass. Suddenly, his face changed to one of utter stupefaction. "Mon Dieu," he ejaculated. "What is it?" "The hands of the watch point to 7 o'clock. "What?" cried the examining magistrate, astonished. But Poirot, deft as ever, took the broken trinket from the startled commissary and held it to his ear. Then he smiled. "The glass is broken, yes, but the watch itself is still going." The explanation of the mystery was greeted with a relieved smile, but the magistrate bethought him of another point. "But surely it is not 7 o'clock now." "No," said Poirot gently, "it is a few minutes after 5. Possibly the watch gains. Is that so, madame?" Mrs. Renaud was frowning perplexedly. "It does gain," she admitted, "but I've never known it to gain quite so much as that." With a gesture of impatience, the magistrate left the matter of the watch and proceeded with his interrogatory. "Madame, the front door was found ajar. It seems almost certain that the murderers entered that way, yet it has not been forced at all. Can you suggest any explanation?" Possibly my husband went out for a stroll the last thing and forgot to latch it when he came in. Is that a likely thing to happen? Very. My husband was the most absent-minded of men. There was a slight frown on her brow as she spoke, as though this trait in the dead man's character had at times vexed her. There is one inference I think we might draw, remarked the commissary suddenly. Since the men insisted on M. Renaud dressing himself, it looks as though the place they were taking him to, the place where the secret was concealed, lay some distance away. The magistrate nodded. Yes, far, and yet not too far, since he spoke of being back by morning. What times does the last train leave the station of Merlinville? Asked Poirot. 11:50 one way and 12:17 the other, but it is more probable that they had a motor waiting. Of course, agreed Poirot, looking somewhat crestfallen. Indeed, that might be one way of tracing them, continued the magistrate, brightening. A motor containing two foreigners is quite likely to have been noticed. That is an excellent point, M. Bex. He smiled to himself, and then, becoming grave once more, he said to Mrs. Renaud, There is another question. Do you know anyone of the name of Duveen? Duveen, Mrs. Renaud repeated thoughtfully. No, for the moment, I cannot say I do. You have never heard your husband mention anyone of that name? Never. Do you know anyone whose Christian name is Bella? He watched Mrs. Renaud narrowly as he spoke, seeking to surprise any signs of anger or consciousness, but she merely shook her head in quite a natural manner. He continued his questions. Are you aware that your husband had a visitor last night? Now he saw the red mount slightly in her cheeks, but she replied composedly. No, who was that? A lady. Indeed. But, for the moment, the magistrate was content to say no more. It seemed unlikely that Madame d'Aubreuil had any connection with the crime, and he was anxious not to upset Mrs. Renaud more than necessary. He made a sign to the commissary, and the latter replied with a nod. Then, rising, he went across the room and returned with the glass jar we had seen in the outhouse in his hand. From this, he took the dagger. Madame, he said gently, do you recognize this? She gave a little cry. Yes, that is my little dagger. Then she saw the stained point, and she drew back, her eyes widening with horror. Is that blood? Yes, madame, your husband was killed with this weapon. He removed it hastily from sight. You are quite sure about its being the one that was on your dressing table last night? Oh yes, it was a present from my son. He was in the Air Force during the war. He gave his age as older than it was. There was a touch of the proud mother in her voice. This was made from a streamlined aeroplane wire and was given to me by my son as a souvenir of the war. I see, madame. That brings us to another matter. Your son, where is he now? It is necessary that he should be telegraphed to without delay. Jack, he is on his way to Buenos Aires. What? Yes, my husband telegraphed to him yesterday. He had sent him on business to Paris, but yesterday he discovered that it would be necessary for him to proceed without delay to South America. There was a boat leaving Cherbourg for Buenos Aires last night, and he wired him to catch it. Have you any knowledge of what the business in Buenos Aires was? No, monsieur, I know nothing of its nature, but Buenos Aires is not my son's final destination. He was going overland from there to Santiago. And in unison, the magistrate and the commissary exclaimed, Santiago, again Santiago. It was at this moment, when we were all stunned by the mention of that word, that Poirot approached Mrs. Renaud. He had been standing by the window like a man lost in a dream, and I doubt if he had fully taken in what had passed. He paused by the lady's side with a bow. "Pardon, madame, but may I examine your wrists?" Though slightly surprised at the request, Mrs. Renaud held them out to him. Round each of them was a cruel red mark where the cords had bitten into the flesh. As he examined them, I fancied that a momentary flicker of excitement I had seen in his eyes disappeared. "They must cause you great pain," he said, and once more he looked puzzled. But the magistrate was speaking excitedly. "Young M. Renaud must be communicated with at once by wireless. It is vital that we should know anything he can tell us about this trip to Santiago." He hesitated. "I hoped he might have been near at hand, so that we could have saved you pain, madame." He paused. "You mean," she said in a low voice, "the identification of my husband's body?" The magistrate bowed his head. "I am a strong woman, monsieur. I can bear all that is required of me. I am ready now." "Oh, tomorrow will be quite soon enough, I assure you." "I prefer to get it over," she said in a low tone, a spasm of pain crossing her face. "If you will be so good as to give me your arm, doctor." The doctor hastened forward, a cloak was thrown over Mrs. Renaud's shoulders, and a slow procession went down the stairs. M. Bex hurried on ahead to open the door of the shed. In a minute or two, Mrs. Renaud appeared in the doorway. She was very pale, but resolute. Behind her, M. Hortet was clacking commiserations and apologies like an animated hen. She raised her hand to her face. "A moment, messieurs, while I steel myself." She took her hand away and looked down at the dead man. Then the marvelous self-control which had upheld her so far deserted her. "Paul," she cried, "husband, oh God!" and pitching forward she fell unconscious to the ground. Instantly Poirot was beside her. He raised the lid of. Her eye felt her pulse. When he had satisfied himself that she had really fainted, he drew aside. He caught me by the arm. "I am an imbecile, my friend. If ever there was love and grief in a woman's voice, I heard it then. My little idea was all wrong. Bien, I must start again." Chapter 6. The Scene of the Crime. Between them, the doctor and M. Hortet carried the unconscious woman into the house. The commissary looked after them, shaking his head. "Pauvre femme," he murmured to himself. "The shock was too much for her. Well, we can do nothing. Now, M. Poirot, shall we visit the place where the crime was committed?" "If you please, M. Bex." We passed through the house and out by the front door. Poirot had looked up at the staircase in passing and shook his head in a dissatisfied manner. "It is to me incredible that the servants heard nothing. The creaking of that staircase, with 3 people descending it, would awaken the dead. It was the middle of the night, remember, they were sound asleep by then." But Poirot continued to shake his head as though not fully accepting the explanation. On the sweep of the drive, he paused, looking up at the house. What moved them in the first place to try if the front door were open? It was a most unlikely thing that it should be. It was far more probable that they should at once try to force a window. "But all the windows on the ground floor are barred with iron shutters," objected the commissary. Poirot pointed to a window on the first floor. "That is the window of the bedroom we have just come from, is it not? And see, there is a tree by which it would be the easiest thing in the world to mount." "Possibly," admitted the other, "but they could not have done so without leaving footprints in the flower bed." I saw the justice of his words. There were 2 large oval flower beds planted with scarlet geraniums, one each side of the steps leading up to the front door. The tree in question had its roots actually at the back of the bed itself, and it would have been impossible to reach it without stepping on the bed. "You see," continued the commissary, "owing to the dry weather no prints would show on the drive or paths, but on the soft mold of the flower bed it would have been a very different affair. Poirot went close to the bed and studied it attentively. As Bex had said, the mold was perfectly smooth. There was not an indentation on it anywhere. Poirot nodded, as though convinced, and we turned away, but he suddenly darted off and began examining the other flower bed. Bex, he called, see here, here are plenty of traces for you. The commissary joined him and smiled. My dear Poirot, those are without doubt the footprints of the gardener's large hobnailed boots. In any case, it would have no importance, since this side we have no tree, and consequently no means of gaining access to the upper story. True, said Poirot, evidently crestfallen. So you think these footprints are of no importance? Not the least in the world. Then, to my utter astonishment, Poirot pronounced these words. I do not agree with you. I have a little idea that these footprints are the most important things we have seen yet. Beck said nothing, merely shrugged his shoulders. He was far too courteous to utter his real opinion. Shall we proceed? He asked instead. Certainly, I can investigate this matter of the footprints later, said Poirot cheerfully. Instead of following the drive down to the gate, Bex turned up a path that branched off at right angles. It led, up a slight incline, round to the right of the house, and was bordered on either side by a kind of shrubbery. Suddenly it emerged into a little clearing from which one obtained a view of the sea. A seat had been placed here, and not far from it was a rather ramshackle shed. A few steps further on, a neat line of small bushes marked the boundary of the villa grounds. Bex pushed his way through these, and we found ourselves on a wide stretch of open downs. I looked round and saw something that filled me with astonishment. Why, this is a golf course, I cried. Bex nodded. The limits are not completed yet, he explained. It is hoped to be able to open them sometime next month. It was some of the men working on them who discovered the body early this morning. I gave a gasp. A little to my left, where for the moment I had overlooked it, was a long narrow pit, and by it, face downwards, was the body of a man. For a moment, my heart gave a terrible leap, and I had a wild fancy that the tragedy had been duplicated. But the commissary dispelled my illusion by moving forward with a sharp exclamation of annoyance. What have my police been about? They had strict orders to allow no one near the place without proper credentials. The man on the ground turned his head over his shoulder. But I have proper credentials, he remarked, and rose slowly to his feet. My dear Gerard, cried the commissary, I had no idea that you had arrived, even. The examining magistrate has been awaiting you with the utmost impatience. As he spoke, I was scanning the newcomer with the keenest curiosity. The famous detective from the Paris Sûreté was familiar to me by name, and I was extremely interested to see him in the flesh. He was very tall, perhaps about 30 years of age, with auburn hair and moustache, and a military carriage. There was a trace of arrogance in his manner, which showed that he was fully alive to his own importance. Bex introduced us, presenting Poirot as a colleague. A flicker of interest came into the detective's eye. I know you by name, Poirot, he said. You cut quite a figure in the old days, didn't you? But methods are very different now. Crimes, though, are very much the same, remarked Poirot gently. I saw at once that Gerard was prepared to be hostile. He resented the other being associated with him, and I felt that if he came across any clue of importance, he would be more than likely to keep it to himself. The examining magistrate, began Bex again, but Gerard interrupted him rudely. A fig for the examining magistrate. The light is the important thing. For all practical purposes, it will be gone in another half-hour or so. I know all about the case, and the people at the house will do very well until tomorrow, but if we're going to find a clue to the murderers, here is the spot we shall find it. Is it your police who have been trampling all over the place? I thought they knew better nowadays. Assuredly they do. The marks you complain of were made by the workmen who discovered the body. The other grunted disgustedly. I can see the tracks where the three of them came through the hedge, but they were cunning. You can just recognize the center footmarks as those of M. Renaud, but those on either side have been carefully obliterated. Not that there would really be much to see anyway on this hard ground, but they weren't taking any chances. The external sign, said Poirot. That is what you seek, eh? The other detective stared. Of course. A very faint smile came to Poirot's lips. He seemed about to speak, but checked himself. He bent down to where a spade was lying. That's what the grave was dug with, right enough, said Giraud, but you'll get nothing from it. It was Renaud's own spade, and the man who used it wore gloves. Here they are. He gesticulated with his foot to where two soiled earth-stained gloves were lying, and they're Renaud's too, or at least his gardener-s. I tell you, the men who planned out this crime were taking no chances. The man was stabbed with his own dagger and would have been buried with his own spade. They counted on leaving no traces. But I'll beat them. There's always something, and I mean to find it. But Poirot was now apparently interested in something else. Short, discolored piece of lead piping which lay beside the spade. He touched it delicately with his finger. And does this, too, belong to the murdered man? He asked, and I thought I detected a subtle flavor of irony in the question. Giraud shrugged his shoulders to indicate that he neither knew nor cared. May have been lying around here for weeks. Anyway, it doesn't interest me. I, on the contrary, find it very interesting, said Poirot sweetly. I guessed that he was merely bent on annoying the Paris detective, and if so, he succeeded. The other turned away rudely, remarking that he had no time to waste, and bending down, he resumed his minute's search of the ground. Meanwhile, Poirot, as though struck by a sudden idea, stepped back over the boundary and tried the door of the little shed. That's locked, said Giraud over his shoulder, but it's only a place where the gardener keeps his rubbish. The spade didn't come from there, but from the tool shed up by the house. Marvelous, murmured M. Bex to me ecstatically. He has been here but half an hour, and he already knows everything. What a man! Undoubtedly Giraud is the greatest detective alive today. Although I disliked the detective heartily, I nevertheless was secretly impressed. Efficiency seemed to radiate from the man. I could not help feeling that, so far, Poirot had not greatly distinguished himself, and it vexed me. He seemed to be directing his attention to all sorts of silly, puerile points that had nothing to do with the case. Indeed, at this juncture, he suddenly asked, M. Bex, tell me, I pray you, the meaning of this whitewashed line that extends all round the grave. Is it a device of the police? No, M. Poirot, it is an affair of the golf course. It shows that there is here to be a bunker, as you call it. A bunker, Poirot turned to me. That is the irregular hole filled with sand and a bank at one side, is it not? I concurred. You do not play the golf, M. Poirot, inquired Bex. I never, what a game. He became excited. Figure to yourself, each hole it is of a different length. The obstacles, they are not arranged mathematically. Even the greens are frequently up one side. There is only one pleasing thing, the how do you call them? Tee boxes. They at least are symmetrical. I could not refrain from a laugh at the way the game appeared to Poirot, and my little friend smiled at me affectionately, bearing no malice. Then he asked, But M. Renaud, without doubt he played the golf. Yes, he was a keen golfer. It's mainly owing to him and to his large subscriptions that this work is being carried forward. He even had a say in the designing of it. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Then he remarked, It was not a very good choice they made of a spot to bury the body. When the men began to dig up the ground, all would have been discovered. Exactly, cried Gerard triumphantly, and that proves that they were strangers to the place. It's an excellent piece of indirect evidence. Yes, said Poirot doubtfully, no one who knew would bury a body there unless they wanted it to be discovered, and that is clearly absurd, is it not? Gerard did not even trouble to reply. Yes, said Poirot in a somewhat dissatisfied voice. Yes, undoubtedly absurd. Chapter 7. The Mysterious Madame d'Aubreuil. As we retraced our steps to the house, M. Bex excused himself for leaving us, explaining that he must immediately acquaint the examining magistrate with the fact of Gerard's arrival. Gerard himself had been obviously delighted when Poirot declared that he had seen all he wanted. The last thing we observed as we left the spot was Gerard crawling about on all fours with a thoroughness in his search that I could not but admire. Poirot guessed my thoughts, for as soon as we were alone, he remarked ironically, "At last you have seen the detective you admire, the human foxhound. Is it not so, my friend?" "At any rate, he's doing something," I said with asperity. "If there's anything to find, he'll find it. Now you." "Bien, I also have found something, a piece of lead piping." "Nonsense, Poirot. You know very well that's got nothing to do with it. I meant little things, traces that may lead us infallibly to the murderers." "Mon ami, a clue of 2 feet long is every bit as valuable as one measuring 2 millimeters, but it is the romantic idea that all important clues must be infinitesimal. As to the piece of lead piping having nothing to do with the crime, you say that because Gerard told you so. No, as I was about to interpose a question, we will say no more. Leave Gerard to his search and me to my ideas. The case seems straightforward enough, and yet, mon ami, I am not satisfied. And do you know why? Because of the wrist watch that is 2 hours fast. And then there are several curious little points that do not seem to fit in. For instance, if the object of the murderers was revenge, why did they not stab Renaud in his sleep and have done with it? "They wanted the secret," I reminded him. Poirot brushed a speck of dust from his sleeve with a dissatisfied air. "Well, where is this secret? Presumably some distance away, since they wish him to dress himself. Yet he is found murdered close at hand, almost within earshot of the house. Then again, it is pure chance that a weapon such as the dagger should be lying about casually, ready to hand." He paused, frowning, and then went on. "Why did the servants hear nothing? Were they drugged? Was there an accomplice, and did that accomplice see to it that the front door should remain open? I wonder if—" He stopped abruptly. We had reached the drive in front of the house. Suddenly he turned to me. "My friend, I am about to surprise you, to please you. I have taken your reproaches to heart. We will examine some footprints." "Where?" "In that right-hand bed. Yonder, M. Beck says that they are the footmarks of the gardener. Let us see if that is so. See, he approaches with his wheelbarrow." Indeed, an elderly man was just crossing the drive with a barrow full of seedlings. Poirot called to him, and he set down the barrow and came hobbling towards us. "You are going to ask him for one of his boots to compare with the footmarks?" I asked breathlessly. My faith in Poirot revived a little. Since he said the footprints in this right-hand bed were important, presumably they were. "Exactly," said Poirot. "But won't he think it very odd?" "He will not think about it at all." We could say no more, for the old man had joined us. "You want me for something, monsieur?" "Yes, you have been gardener here a long time, haven't you?" 24 years, monsieur." "And your name is?" "Auguste, monsieur." I was admiring these magnificent geraniums. They are truly superb. They have been planted long. "Some time, monsieur. But of course, to keep the beds looking smart, One must keep bedding out a few new plants and remove those that are over, besides keeping the old blooms well picked off. You put in some new plants yesterday, didn't you? Those in the middle there, and in the other bed also. Monsieur has a sharp eye. It takes always a day or so for them to pick up. Yes, I put 10 new plants in each bed last night. As Monsieur doubtless knows, one should not put in plants when the sun is hot. Auguste was charmed with Poirot's interest and was quite inclined to be garrulous. "That is a splendid specimen there," said Poirot, pointing. "Might I perhaps have a cutting of it?" "But certainly, monsieur." The old fellow stepped into the bed and carefully took a slip from the plant Poirot had admired. Poirot was profuse in his thanks, and Auguste departed to his barrow. "You see," said Poirot with a smile, as he bent over the bed to examine the indentation of the gardener's hobnailed boot. "It is quite simple. I did not realize that the foot would be inside the boot. You do not use your excellent mental capacities sufficiently. Well, what of the footmark?" I examined the bed carefully. "All the footmarks in the bed were made by the same boot," I said at length after a careful study. "You think so? Eh bien, I agree with you," said Poirot. He seemed quite uninterested, and as though he were thinking of something else. "At any rate," I remarked, "you will have one bee less in your bonnet now." "Mon Dieu, but what an idiom! What does it mean?" "What I meant was that now you will give up your interest in these footmarks." But to my surprise, Poirot shook his head. "No, no, mon ami. At last I am on the right track. I am still in the dark, but as I hinted just now to M. Bex, these footmarks are the most important and interesting things in the case. That poor Giraud, I should not be surprised if he took no notice of them whatever." At that moment, the front door opened, and M. Hortet and the commissary came down the steps. "Ah, M. Poirot, we were coming to look for you," said the magistrate. "It is getting late, but I wish to pay a visit to Madame d'Aubreuil. Without doubt, she will be very much upset by M. Renaud's death, and we may be fortunate enough to get a clue from her. The secret that he did not confide to his wife, it is possible that he may have told it to the woman whose love held him enslaved. We know where our Samsons are weak, don't we?" I admired the picturesqueness of M. Hortet's language. I suspected that the examining magistrate was by now thoroughly enjoying his part in the mysterious drama. "Is M. Giraud not going to accompany us?" asked Poirot. "M. Giraud has shown clearly that he prefers to conduct the case in his own way," said M. Hortet dryly. One could see easily enough that Giraud's cavalier treatment of the examining magistrate had not prejudiced the latter in his favor. We said no more, but fell into line. Poirot walked with the examining magistrate, and the commissary and I followed a few paces behind. "There is no doubt that Francais's story is substantially correct," he remarked to me in a confidential tone. "I have been telephoning headquarters. It seems that 3 times in the last 6 weeks, that is to say since the arrival of M. Renaud at Merlinville, Madame d'Aubreuil has paid a large sum in notes into her banking account. Altogether, the sum totals 200,000 francs. "Dear me," I said, considering, "that must be something like 4,000 pounds. "Precisely. Yes, there can be no doubt that he was absolutely infatuated, but it remains to be seen whether he confided his secret to her. The examining magistrate is hopeful, but I hardly share his views." During this conversation, we were walking down the lane towards the fork in the road where our car had halted earlier in the afternoon, and in another moment I realized that the Villa Marguerite, the home of the mysterious Madame d'Aubreuil, was the small house from which the beautiful girl had emerged. "She has lived here for many years," said the commissary, nodding his head towards the house. "Very quietly, very unobtrusively, She seems to have no friends or relations other than the acquaintances she has made in Merlinville. She never refers to the past, nor to her husband. One does not even know if he is alive or dead. There is a mystery about her, you comprehend. I nodded, my interest growing. And the daughter, I ventured. A truly beautiful young girl, modest, devout, all that she should be. One pities her, for though she may know nothing of the past, a man who wants to ask her hand in marriage must necessarily inform himself. And then the commissary shrugged his shoulders cynically. But it would not be her fault, I cried, with rising indignation. No, but what will you? A man is particular about his wife's antecedents. I was prevented from further argument by our arrival at the door. M. Hortet rang the bell. A few minutes elapsed, and then we heard a footfall within, and the door was opened. On the threshold stood my young goddess of that afternoon. When she saw us, the color left her cheeks, leaving her deathly white, and her eyes widened with apprehension. There was no doubt about it, she was afraid. Mademoiselle d'Aubreuil, said M. Hortet, sweeping off his hat, we regret infinitely to disturb you, but the exigencies of the law, you comprehend. My compliments to Madame your mother, and will she have the goodness to grant me a few moments' interview? For a moment the girl stood motionless. Her left hand was pressed to her side, as though to still the sudden unconquerable agitation of her heart. But she mastered herself and said in a low voice, I will go and see. Please come inside. She entered a room on the left of the hall, and we heard the low murmur of her voice. And then another voice, much the same in timbre, but with a slightly harder inflection behind its mellow roundness, said, But certainly, ask them to enter. In another minute, we were face to face with the mysterious Madame d'Aubreuil. She was not nearly so tall as her daughter, and the rounded curves of her figure had all the grace of full maturity. Her hair, again unlike her daughter's, was dark, and parted in the middle in the Madonna style. Her eyes, half hidden by the drooping lids, were blue. There was a dimple in the round chin, and the half-parted lips seemed always to hover on the verge of a mysterious smile. There was something almost exaggeratedly feminine about her, at once yielding and seductive. Though very well preserved, she was certainly no longer young, but her charm was of the quality which is independent of age. Standing there in her black dress with the fresh white collar and cuffs, her hands clasped together, she looked subtly appealing and helpless. You wish to see me, monsieur? She asked. Yes. Madame, M. Hortet cleared his throat. I am investigating the death of M. Renaud. You have heard of it, no doubt. She bowed her head without speaking. Her expression did not change. We came to ask you whether you can, throw any light upon the circumstances surrounding it. The surprise of her tone was excellent. Yes, madame, it would, perhaps, be better if we could speak to you alone. He looked meaningly in the direction of the girl. Madame d'Aubreuil turned to her. Marthe, dear. But the girl shook her head. No, mammon, I will not go. I am not a child. I am 22. I shall not go. Madame d'Aubreuil turned back to the examining magistrate. You see, monsieur, I should prefer not to speak before Mademoiselle d'Aubreuil. As my daughter says, she is not a child. For a moment, the magistrate hesitated, baffled. Very well, madame, he said at last. Have it your own way. We have reason to believe that you were in the habit of visiting the dead man at his villa in the evenings. Is that so? The color rose in the lady's pale cheeks, but she replied quietly, I deny your right to ask me such a question. Madame, we are investigating a murder. Well, what of it? I had nothing to do with the murder. Madame, we do not say that for a moment, but you knew the dead man well. Did he ever confide in you as to any danger that threatened him? Never. Did he ever mention his life in Santiago and any enemies he may have made there? No. Then you can give us no help at all. I fear not. I really do not see why you should come to me. Cannot his wife tell you what you want to know? Her voice held a slender inflection of irony. Madame Renaud has told us all she can. Ah, said Madame d'Aubreuil, I wonder. You wonder what, Madame? Nothing. The examining magistrate looked at her. He was aware that he was fighting a duel and that he had no mean antagonist. You persist in your statement that M. Renaud confided nothing in you. Why should you think it likely that he should confide in me? Because, Madame, said M. Hortet, with calculated brutality, a man tells to his mistress what he does not always tell to his wife. Ah, she sprang forward, her eyes flashed fire. Monsieur, you insult me, and before my daughter, I can tell you nothing. Have the goodness to leave my house. The honors undoubtedly rested with the lady. We left the Villa Marguerite like a shamefaced pack of schoolboys. The magistrate muttered angry ejaculations to himself. Poirot seemed lost in thought. Suddenly he came out of his reverie with a start and inquired of M. Hortet if there was a good hotel near at hand. There is a small place, the Hôtel des Bains, on this side of town, a few 100 yards down the road. It will be handy for your investigations. We shall see you in the morning then, I presume. Yes, I thank you, M. Hortet. With mutual civilities, we parted company, Poirot and I going towards Merlinville, and the others returning to the Villa Genevieve. The French police system is very marvelous, said Poirot, looking after them. The information they possess about everyone's life, down to the most commonplace detail, is extraordinary. Though he has only been here a little over 6 weeks, they are perfectly well acquainted with M. Renaud's tastes and pursuits, and at a moment's notice, they can produce information as to Madame d'Aubreuil's banking account and the sums that have lately been paid in. Undoubtedly, the dossier is a great institution. But what is that? He turned sharply. A figure was running hatless down the road after us. It was Marthe d'Aubreuil. I beg your pardon, she cried breathlessly as she reached us. I should not do this, I know. You must not tell my mother. But is it true what the people say, that M. Renaud called in a detective before he died, and that you are he? Yes, mademoiselle, said Poirot. Gently, it is quite true, but how did you learn it? Francois told our Amélie, explained Marthe with a blush. Poirot made a grimace. The secrecy, it is impossible in an affair of this kind, not that it matters. Well, mademoiselle, what is it you want to know? The girl hesitated. She seemed longing, yet fearing, to speak. At last, almost in a whisper, she asked, Is anyone suspected? Poirot eyed her keenly. Then he replied evasively, Suspicion is in the air at present, mademoiselle. Yes, I know, but anyone in particular? Why do you want to know? The girl seemed frightened by the question. All at once, Poirot's words about her earlier in the day recurred to me. The girl with the anxious eyes. M. Renaud was always very kind to me, she replied at last. It is natural that I should be interested. I see, said Poirot. Well, mademoiselle, suspicion at present is hovering round 2 persons. 2. I could have sworn there was a note of surprise and relief in her voice. Their names are unknown, but they are presumed to be Chileans from Santiago. And now, mademoiselle, you see what comes of being young and beautiful. I have betrayed professional secrets for you. The girl laughed merrily, and then, rather shyly, she thanked him. I must run back now. Maman will miss me. And she turned and ran back up the road, looking like a modern Atalanta. I stared after her. Mon ami, said Poirot, in his gentle, ironical voice. "Is it that we are to remain planted here all night, just because you have seen a beautiful young woman and your head is in a whirl?" I laughed and apologized. "But she is beautiful, Poirot. Anyone might be excused for being bowled over by her." Poirot groaned. "Mon dear, but it is that you have the susceptible heart." "Poirot," I said, "do you remember after the Styles case when you were in love with two charming women at once, and neither of them were for you?" "Yes, I remember. You consoled me by saying that perhaps someday we should hunt together again, and that then." By then. "Well, we are hunting together again, and—" I paused and laughed rather self-consciously. But to my surprise, Poirot shook his head very earnestly. "Ah, mon ami, do not set your heart on Marthe d'Aubreuil. She is not for you, that one. Take it from Papa Poirot." "Why," I cried, "the commissary assured me that she was as good as she is beautiful, a perfect angel." "Some of the greatest criminals I have known had the faces of angels," remarked Poirot cheerfully. "A malformation of the grey cells may coincide quite easily with the face of a Madonna." "Poirot," I cried, horrified, "you cannot mean that you suspect an innocent child like this." "Ta-ta-ta, do not excite yourself. I have not said that I suspected her, but you must admit that her anxiety to know about the case is somewhat unusual." "For once I see further than you do," I said. "Her anxiety is not for herself, but for her mother." "My friend," said Poirot, "as usual you see nothing at all. Madame d'Aubreuil is very well able to look after herself without her daughter worrying about her. I admit I was teasing you just now, but all the same I repeat what I said before. Do not set your heart on that girl. She is not for you. I, Hercule Poirot, know it. Sacré, if only I could remember where I had seen that face." "What face?" I asked, surprised. "The daughter S." "No, the mother S." Noting my surprise, he nodded emphatically. "But yes, it is as I tell you. It was a long time ago, when I was still with the police in Belgium. I have never actually seen the woman before, but I have seen her picture and in connection with some case, I rather fancy." "Yes, I may be mistaken, but I rather fancy that it was a murder case." Chapter 8. An Unexpected Meeting. We were up at the Villa betimes next morning. The man on guard at the gate did not bar our way this time. Instead, he respectfully saluted us, and we passed on to the house. The maid Léonie was just coming down the stairs and seemed not averse to the prospect of a little conversation. Poirot inquired after the health of Mrs. Renaud. Léonie shook her head. "She is terribly upset, la pauvre dame. She will eat nothing but nothing, and she is as pale as a ghost. It is heartrending to see her. Ah, par exemple, it is not I who would grieve like that for a man who had deceived me with another woman." Poirot nodded sympathetically. "What you say is very just, but what will you? The heart of a woman who loves will forgive many blows. Still, undoubtedly, there must have been many scenes of recrimination between them in the last few months." Again, Léonie shook her head. "Never, monsieur, never have I heard Madame utter a word of protest, of reproach even. She had the temper and disposition of an angel, quite different to monsieur. Monsieur Renaud had not the temper of an angel. Far from it. When he enraged himself, the whole house knew of it. The day that he quarrelled with M. Jacques, ma foi, they might have been heard in the market-place, they shouted so loud." "Indeed," said Poirot, "and when did this quarrel take place?" "Oh, it was just before M. Jacques went to Paris. Almost he missed his train. He came out of the library and caught up his bag which he had left in the hall. The automobile, it was being repaired, and he had to run for the station. I was dusting the salon, and I saw him pass, and his face was white, white with 2 burning spots of red. Ah, but he was angry. Leonie was enjoying her narrative thoroughly. And the dispute, what was it about? Ah, that I do not know, confessed Leonie. It is true that they shouted, but their voices were so loud and high, and they spoke so fast, that only one well acquainted with English could have comprehended. But monsieur, he was like a thundercloud all day. Impossible to please him. The sound of a door shutting upstairs cut short Leonie's loquacity. "And Francis, who awaits me," she exclaimed, awakening to a tardy remembrance of her duties. "That old one she always scolds." "One moment, mademoiselle. The examining magistrate, where is he?" "They have gone out to look at the automobile in the garage." Monsieur the commissary had some idea that it might have been used on the night of the murder. "Quelle idée," murmured Poirot, as the girl disappeared. "You will go out and join them." "No, I shall await their return in the salon. It is cool there on this hot morning." This placid way of taking things did not quite commend itself to me. "If you don't mind," I said, and hesitated. "Not in the least. You wish to investigate on your own account, eh? Well, I'd rather like to have a look at Giraud, if he's anywhere about, and see what he's up to." "The human foxhound," murmured Poirot, as he leaned back in a comfortable chair and closed his eyes. "By all means, my friend, au revoir." I strolled out of the front door. It was certainly hot. I turned up the path we had taken the day before. I had a mind to study the scene of the crime myself. I did not go directly to the spot, however, but turned aside into the bushes so as to come out on the links some 100 yards or so further to the right. If Giraud was still on the spot, I wanted to observe his methods before he knew of my presence. But the shrubbery here was much denser, and I had quite a struggle to force my way through. When I emerged at last on the course, it was quite unexpectedly and with such vigor that I cannoned heavily into a young lady who had been standing with her back to the plantation. She not unnaturally gave a suppressed shriek, but I too uttered an exclamation of surprise, for it was my friend of the train, Cinderella. The surprise was mutual. "You," we both exclaimed simultaneously. The young lady recovered herself. "Wursting, my only aunt," she exclaimed. "What are you doing here?" "For the matter of that, what are you?" I retorted. "When last I saw you, the day before yesterday, you were trotting home to England like a good little boy. Have they given you a season ticket to and fro on the strength of your MP?" I ignored the end of the speech. "When last I saw you," I said, "you were trotting home with your sister like a good little girl. By the way, how is your sister?" A flash of white teeth rewarded me. "How kind of you to ask. My sister is well, I thank you." "She is here with you." "She remained in town," said the minx with dignity. "I don't believe you've got a sister," I laughed. "If you have, her name is Harris." "Do you remember mine?" she asked with a smile. "Cinderella, but you're going to tell me the real one now, aren't you?" She shook her head with a wicked look. "Not even why you're here?" "Oh, that, I suppose you've heard of members of my profession resting at expensive French watering places. Dirt cheap if you know where to go." I eyed her keenly. "Still, you'd no intention of coming here when I met you 2 days ago." "We all have our disappointments," said Miss Cinderella sententiously. "There now, I've told you quite as much as is good for you. Little boys should not be inquisitive. You've not yet told me what you're doing here. Got the MP in tow, I suppose, doing the gay boy on the beach." I shook my head. "Guess again. You remember my telling you that my great friend was a detective?" "Yes. And perhaps you've heard about this crime at the Villa Genevieve." She stared at me. Her breast heaved, and her eyes grew wide and round. "You don't mean that you're in on that?" I nodded. There was no doubt that I had scored heavily. Her emotion, as she regarded me, was only too evident. For some few seconds, she remained silent, staring at me. Then she nodded her head emphatically. "Well, if that doesn't beat the band, tote me round. I want to see all the horrors." "What do you mean?" "What I say, bless the boy. Didn't I tell you I doted on crimes? What do you think I'm imperiling my ankles for in high-heeled shoes over this stubble? I've been nosing round for hours. Tried the front way in, but that old stick-in-the-mud of a French gendarme wasn't taking any. I guess Helen of Troy and Cleopatra and Mary, Queen of Scots, rolled in one wouldn't cut ice with him. It's a real piece of luck happening on you this way. Come on, show me all the sights." "But look here, wait a minute, I can't. Nobody else allowed in. They're awfully strict." "Aren't you and your friend the big bugs?" I was loath to relinquish my position of importance. "Why are you so keen?" I asked weakly. "And what is it you want to see?" "Oh, everything. The place where it happened, and the weapon, and the body, and any fingerprints or interesting things like that. I've never had a chance of being right in on a murder like this before. It'll last me all my life." I turned away, sickened. What were women coming to nowadays? The girl's ghoulish excitement nauseated me. I had read of the mobs of women who besieged the law courts when some wretched man was being tried for his life on the capital charge. I had sometimes wondered who these women were. Now I knew. They were of the likeness of Cinderella, young, yet obsessed with a yearning for morbid excitement, for sensation at any price, without regard to any decency or good feeling. The vividness of the girl's beauty had attracted me in spite of myself, yet at heart I retained my first impression of disapproval and dislike. I thought of my mother, long since dead. What would she have said of this strange modern product of girlhood, the pretty face with the paint and powder and the ghoulish mind behind? "Come off your high horse," said the lady suddenly, "and don't give yourself airs. When you got called to this job, did you put your nose in the air and say it was a nasty business and you wouldn't be mixed up in it?" "No, but if you'd been here on a holiday, wouldn't you be nosing round just the same as I am?" "Of course you would. I'm a man, you're a woman. Your idea of a woman is someone who gets on a chair and shrieks if she sees a mouse. That's all prehistoric. But you will show me round, won't you? You see, it might make a big difference to me." "In what way?" "They're keeping all the reporters out. I might make a big scoop with one of the papers. You don't know how much they pay for a bit of inside stuff." I hesitated. She slipped a small soft hand into mine. "Please, there's a dear." I capitulated. Secretly, I knew that I should rather enjoy the part of showman. After all, the moral attitude displayed by the girl was none of my business. I was a little nervous as to what the examining magistrate might say, but I reassured myself by the reflection that no harm could possibly be done. We repaired first to the spot where the body had been discovered. A man was on guard there, who saluted respectfully, knowing me by sight, and raised no question as to my companion. Presumably, he regarded her as vouched for by me. I explained to Cinderella just how the discovery had been made, and she listened attentively, sometimes putting an intelligent question. Then we turned our steps in the direction of the villa. I proceeded rather cautiously, for truth to tell, I was not at all anxious to meet anyone. I took the girl through the shrubbery round to the back of the house where the small shed was. I recollected that yesterday evening, after relocking the door, M. Bex had left the key with the Sergeant de Villemarchot, in case M. Giraud should require it while we are upstairs. I thought it quite likely that the Sûreté detective, after using it, had returned it to Marchot again. Leaving the girl out of sight in the shrubbery, I entered the house. Marchot was on duty outside the door of the salon. From within came the murmur of voices. Monsieur desires Hortet. He is within. He is again interrogating Francois. No, I said hastily, I don't want him, but I should very much like the key of the shed outside if it is not against regulations. But certainly, monsieur, he produced it. Here it is. M. le Juge gave orders that all facilities were to be placed at your disposal. You will return it to me when you have finished out there, that is all. Of course. I felt a thrill of satisfaction as I realized that in Marchot's eyes, at least, I ranked equally in importance with Poirot. The girl was waiting for me. She gave an exclamation of delight as she saw the key in my hand. You've got it then. Of course, I said coolly. All the same, you know, what I'm doing is highly irregular. You've been a perfect duck, and I shan't forget it. Come along. They can't see us from the house, can they? Wait a minute, I arrested her eager advance. I won't stop you if you really wish to go in, but do you? You've seen the grave and the grounds, and you've heard all the details of the affair. Isn't that enough for you? This is going to be gruesome, you know, and unpleasant. She looked at me for a moment with an expression that I could not quite fathom. Then she laughed. Me for the horrors, she said. Come along. In silence we arrived at the door of the shed. I opened it and we passed in. I walked over to the body and gently pulled down the sheet as M. Bex had done the preceding afternoon. A little gasping sound escaped from the girl's lips, and I turned and looked at her. There was horror on her face now, and those debonair high spirits of hers were quenched utterly. She had not chosen to listen to my advice, and she was punished now for her disregard of it. I felt singularly merciless towards her. She should go through with it now. I turned the corpse gently over. You see, I said, he was stabbed. In the back. Her voice was almost soundless. With what? I nodded towards the glass jar. That dagger. Suddenly the girl reeled and then sank down in a heap. I sprang to her assistance. You are faint, come out of here. It has been too much for you. Water, she murmured, quick water. I left her and rushed into the house. Fortunately, none of the servants were about, and I was able to secure a glass of water unobserved and add a few drops of brandy from a pocket flask. In a few minutes, I was back again. The girl was lying as I had left her, but a few sips of the brandy and water revived her in a marvelous manner. Take me out of here, oh, quickly, quickly, she cried, shuddering. Supporting her with my arm, I led her out into the air, and she pulled the door to behind her. Then she drew a deep breath. That's better. Oh, it was horrible. Why did you ever let me go in? I felt this to be so feminine that I could not forbear a smile. Secretly, I was not dissatisfied with her collapse. It proved that she was not quite so callous as I had thought her. After all, she was little more than a child, and her curiosity had probably been of the unthinking order. I did my best to stop you, you know, I said gently. I suppose you did. Well, goodbye. Look here, you can't start off like that, all alone. You're not fit for it. I insist on accompanying you back to Merlinville. Nonsense, I'm quite all right now. Supposing you felt faint again. No, I shall come with you. But this she combated with a good deal of energy. In the end, however, I prevailed so far as to be allowed to accompany her to the outskirts of the town. We retraced our steps over our former route, passing the grave again and making a detour on to the road. Where the first straggling line of shops began, she stopped and held out her hand. Goodbye, and thank you ever so much for coming with me. Are you sure you're all right now? Quite, thanks. I hope you won't get into any trouble over showing me things. I disclaimed the idea lightly. Well, goodbye. Au revoir, I corrected. If you're staying here, we shall meet again. She flashed a smile at me. That's so, au revoir then. Wait a second, you haven't told me your address. Oh, I'm staying at the Hotel du Fair. It's a little place, but quite good. Come and look me up tomorrow. I will, I said, with perhaps rather unnecessary empressement. I watched her out of sight, then turned and retraced my steps to the villa. I remembered that I had not relocked the door of the shed. Fortunately, no one had noticed the oversight, and turning the key, I removed it and returned it to the Sergeant de Ville. And as I did so, it came upon me suddenly that though Cinderella had given me her address, I still did not know her name.